And of course, I want to start by talking about the situation that played out on Saturday, really into Friday there, as we know that two U.S. service members were killed as a result of that strike that took place on a base in Jordan. Of course, you are in Israel. When you hear something like this happening, you find out that U.S. service members have died. What's kind of going through your mind as you're watching all of this play out?
I can tell you personally, and I think I speak on behalf of the people of Israel, we look at the U.S. as our number one ally, brothers and sisters in arms. I was very saddened to hear about the loss of U.S. servicemen's life. The U.S., like Israel, at the end of the day, are trying to defeat a massive terror regime that is trying to arm itself with nuclear weapons, the regime of Iran. And when we see Iran firing rockets all over the Middle East, at Bahrain, at Kuwait, at Jordan, it's like a madman that with a machine gun that's just shooting in every single direction. And my heart goes out to those families. We've lost just in Lebanon alone with the Hezbollah, which is a terror proxy of Iran. We've lost 38 of our own servicemen and women, and not to mention our civilians. And if Iran had the capability to target U.S. civilians, there's no doubt it would be doing so. But these two gentlemen, whose names we don't yet know, fell in the line of duty in the historic, really mission to try to prevent Iran from destroying the Middle East and much of the world.
On that same note here, we have this post, and I want to keep mentioning here that we have not seen Mujtaba Khamenei. We have not heard his voice. We've just had statements that are being read there on Iranian state TV that are attributed to him. Not even clear if he's running his X page, but he called the U.S. the Great Satan. He's referred to Israel by a lot of names as well. To read something like this, what does that say to you about maybe where things stand right now?
Well, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. His father, Ali Khamenei, has been calling for decades the United States the Great Satan and Israel the Little Satan. They've been burning American and Israeli flags the entire time. They've been threatening Israel. They've been calling for the destruction of Israel. And it's not without Mujtaba Khamenei's approval that there was that massive poster in the middle of Tehran that called for the targeting of President Trump. I mean, look at these people. These are the people that President Trump reached out to with an olive branch, offering them, even despite all the evil that they've done to the world, offering to rebuild their economy, offering them to have infrastructure projects, have a new Middle East, have peace with Israel. But you know what? This regime, this IRGC, Mujtaba Khamenei, they are dedicated to one thing, which is really suicidal death and taking down the rest of the world with them. They're a radical religious regime, and it just shows that they not only rebuff the United States, they threaten the president, and we have to understand that behind these words are actions that they want to complete. Had the U.S. and Israel not struck them, Josh, both in June of last year and in March of this year, they would have today an atomic bomb, and guess what? They say they would use it, and they would use it. And we have to understand the threat here, and that this is an opportunity to seriously degrade this regime so that they don't pose a threat to the United States, to Israel, and to really the world at large.
And what you're looking at is some of the video there that was provided by CENTCOM of that eighth straight day of strikes. Of course, much more intense here. They have been intensifying in general, but after you have the death of U.S. service members in Jordan, I mean, of course, they're going to intensify even further. And I wanted to ask you, you touched on this, but as we talk about the fact that Iran isn't just firing on U.S. troops. You're seeing these missiles, drones that are fired into places like Bahrain, Kuwait, Jordan, as we mentioned, Iraq. What does that say about the fact that Iran is firing at these other Arab Gulf nations there, which are their neighbors?
Yeah, they really have no allegiance, including to their Arab and or Muslim brothers, certainly not to Israel. What they really are about is a tyrannical regime, and they know what their pressure points are. The pressure points are striking civilians. Every single death that happened inside the state of Israel from Iranian bombs. Every single one of them were civilians. Entire families were eliminated. We all took cover when you'd hear these sirens. You don't know if you and your family, if that's going to be the last minute, because they're aiming for civilians. They struck hotels in the UAE. They struck hotels of their best friends. And this really has to show us that Iran, it's not an Arab problem. It's not a Jewish problem. It's not only a U.S. problem. It is a serious problem that wants to arm itself with an atomic weapon, which is why Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Trump have agreed from the beginning. If it can be done diplomatically, great. But deal or no deal, under no circumstances, there will not be a nuclear Iran.
As we kind of look to see what happens next, do we know if Prime Minister Netanyahu is going to be visiting here in the U.S. to meet with President Trump? He's had several meetings with Trump since Trump began his second term. They've met in the U.S. Is there a meeting that's planned for the near future here?
First of all, I don't think in the history of the two countries have there ever been more meetings and more phone calls. The two heads of state speak at least once a week, if not more. At times during the war, the prime minister had mentioned that they were speaking on a daily basis, and they've met, numerous times. And yes, the president did extend an invitation, and I believe that they're working out the details. But what it really shows you is that there's no daylight whatsoever between the U.S. and Israel. A lot of times there are these allegations that one is pulling the other. It's ridiculous. The two are coordinated. The United States knows that its greatest ally in the entire world, the most loyal ally that's tried and tested, is Israel. And Israel knows that the United States is our greatest ally. And I think that we can look at this, and the world should be looking at this, as two countries, vastly different sizes, but united in terms of really morals and values, are standing up to evil. And it's just shocking that more countries, including in Europe, haven't done so. They're kind of missing the boat. This is the opportunity for you to fight evil. And I hope more will will really join this. And we can look back and say, you know what? The world stood up for good. The world prevented evil from metastasizing.
And right now, we are running a poll there on the bottom of your screen. All you have to do is scan that QR code on the bottom right or go to livenowfox.com/connect and hit the Vote Now tab. The question, pretty simple here. Should the U.S. continue strikes on Iran? Your options, yes or no. And of course, we're asking this in the wake of those service members being killed in that attack over in Jordan.
Israel's main concern, Josh, Israel has shown that it can use immense force when needed to prevent Iranian threats. Iran posed before both the June campaign and this campaign an existential threat to the state of Israel. All of those massive, 2,000-pound ballistic missiles that slammed into homes and killed people. Iran wants to arm them with nuclear devices and atomic bombs. And Israel has said, and Prime Minister Netanyahu said from the very beginning, and the Israeli people are united, we're not going to wait till that, God forbid, nuclear weapon is in the air before we act. The president and the prime minister both agree Iran will not have nuclear weapons, and Israel's not only willing, it will take whatever steps necessary to make sure that doesn't happen.
What are you watching for here as we continue to follow all the developments out of the Middle East? As I mentioned, so much happening pretty much on an hourly basis. Things have definitely picked up here over the past week, or even longer than a week at this point. What are you specifically watching for?
Look, Israel's under very tight security right now. We are aware, it's been in the news, that Iran at any moment does have the capability and the willingness to try to strike Israeli citizens. But, what I'm looking for is, I guess maybe it's a little bit of hope, a little light at the end of the tunnel, that at some point, someone in Iran, someone in charge will decide that they really want to act for the future of those people, re-engage the United States in diplomatic negotiations. Again, the Prime Minister of Israel said, Prime Minister Netanyahu said, we prefer that this be done in a diplomatic way. Certainly, President Trump has tried, but you know what? It doesn't look like it's going to work, because Iran, they lie, they cheat, they manipulate, and their track record really shows, unfortunately, that a piece of paper means nothing to them. And so what we see is the United States willing to use force, and with some dangerous terror entities, force is the only thing that they understand, and it looks that is the path that Iran has chosen.
That brings up a good point here, because even if Iran were to sign a memorandum of understanding, even a peace deal that puts an end to all of this, Does that really mean anything? Does that signature from Mashtaba Hamani, from the IRGC, whoever signs it, does that actually mean anything?
Well, I mean, they signed an MOU just a few months ago, and today they targeted and killed U.S. servicemen. They've shot thousands of weapons and rockets throughout the Middle East. They've been funding their proxies. They've been giving orders to the Houthis to target ships. And you know what? On the most basic level, they've been attacking this entire time civilian shipping through the Strait of Hormuz, an international waterway that could be used to profit the Iranian people, opening that waterway and offering, like any normal country would do, offloading and unloading, ways to enable their petrochemicals to reach the world. But instead of doing that, they see it as an opportunity to choke the world and to blackmail the world. And it's something that should not be tolerated. And President Trump just shows, he gave them a chance. He's given them a chance. I'm sure he really hoped that this could be done in a diplomatic way, but we see that when he sees that's not happening, he's going to protect American interests using force. And I think it sends a very important lesson. Evil, for the most part, doesn't listen to reason. And when you don't listen to reason, you use force. You hope that at least they're going to listen to that.
And again, we are running that poll there on the bottom of our screen. Should the U.S. continue strikes on Iran? All you have to do is scan that QR code, bottom right-hand side, or go to livenowfox.com/connect. And right now, not really surprising, but it is an overwhelming majority. 91% say yes, 9% say no. Right now, we have a few hundred votes that have come in, but I mean, we just popped this up on your screen, so you're going to be able to see all of this changing here in real time. Now, I do want to pop up this live look over Beirut in Lebanon to talk a little bit more about what's happening there as it relates to Israel and the Hezbollah terror group, because information coming out here that Secretary of State Marco Rubio is going to be meeting with Lebanon's president here in just a matter of hours. So how significant is a meeting like that as we look at what's taking place between Israel and Hezbollah?
This is a historic time for Israel and Lebanon. We're all very thankful to President Trump for working with the prime minister and also with the president of Lebanon in order to sign what's called the tripartite agreement. This is the first time that Lebanon has recognized Israeli sovereignty in over 45 years. They've recognized Israel. Israel is not interested, has no territorial ambitions in Lebanon. What we really want is just safety and quiet for the people on the northern border of Israel. And the same thing, the president of Lebanon just wants really, I think, peace for his own country. But we agree that the problem here is Hezbollah. And again, Hezbollah is just another code name for Iran. It's just Iran operating in this area. And right now what this agreement says is that the Lebanese armed forces, the LAF, are going to act definitively to disarm Hezbollah and remove them from the area. And as they do that, and the IDF stands with them side by side, is offering them all the support we can. And in fact, we have 2 pilot zones underway. As soon as they do that, then not only will Israel be safer, Lebanon will be safer, and we can work towards a much longer lasting peace in the region. And I'm sure that that is what Secretary Rubio is working towards, and anything he can do and we can do to move this forward is simply a blessing.
And my last question here, as we talk about one terror group that starts with an H, want to talk about the other one as we're several years removed from the October 7th attack, but of course people in Israel will always remember that, Hamas. I want to ask where things kind of stand between Israel and Hamas, because there were reports that started to circulate that there could be about 20,000 to 25,000 Hamas fighters that now exist, that are now there. And I know that's fairly similar to the number that existed prior to October 7th. Can you kind of break down where things stand right now between Israel and Hamas there in Gaza?
Since the ceasefire that was brokered by the president, Israel moved to a specific security zone called the Yellow Line. And the hope is that Hamas would fulfill their obligation to the agreement that President Trump had put in front of them, which simply calls for them to disarm, turn in all their weapons, and then the people of Gaza could begin living a better life. Unfortunately, Hamas, similar to Hezbollah, also in terms of their radical ideology, also in terms of Iranian funding, took the opposite approach. They've taken their money into buying weapons, rearming, trying to reestablish themselves as the terror heads of the Gaza Strip. And from Israel's perspective, and as you mentioned, we can't allow that to happen again. We cannot allow, if there's any lesson from October 7th, to have a suicidal, murderous terror regime on our border that not only says that they want to kill innocent people, they came into our borders, they raped and killed people. They burnt babies alive. Just the other day, I was in a restaurant and there was a hostage that had been released that walked by, and everyone outside and clapped for them. I mean, it's so raw. We all know someone who was either killed or taken hostage, and Israel's not going to allow that to happen again. And so our first priority is to protect the Israeli people. And if diplomacy doesn't work with Hamas, then Israel, again, is leaving all the options on the table. We've continued targeting key leaders that were posing an imminent threat, and we're hoping that the U.S. and the international community are going to pressure Hamas, pressure Iran to lay down their arms, and so that we can open up a new chapter for the history of Israel, Gaza, Lebanon, and the Middle East.
All right. Doron Spielman there, international spokesperson for the Prime Minister's office there in Israel. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us and helping to break down a variety of developments there. Anything we missed or anything that you want to add here before I let you go?
I just want to reach back, and I know it was a couple of weeks ago, Josh, to July 4th. And July 4th was celebrated in Israel. The Knesset was painted red, white, and blue. And as I walked by, I said, if you look in the United Nations building, if you look at the Liberty Bell, what you see there are biblical passages quoting liberty. And really the bond between our two countries is so deep. I think that, it's not just that we fought a war together, is that we share the quest for freedom and peace together. And this is an opportunity. Sometimes you can do that by passing laws. Sometimes you can do that with negotiations. And sometimes you can do that by standing up for freedom. But this is a time that I think we can be proud Americans and proud Israelis and join together on the quest for really creating a better region and a better future for the entire world.
All right, Doron Spielman, thank you again for taking the time to join us here. I'm sure we'll have you on again very soon to help break down all these developments, as I'm sure there will be more in the coming days. Thank you again for being here with us.
It's my pleasure. Thank you, Josh.